Welcome to Coaching with Confidence and Care podcast, inspired by common topics that arise in coach training, mentoring, and supervision. I am Dr. Luba Desamidze, the founder of Upthink Coaching. I'm an active coach trainer, mentor, and supervisor. If you are listening, you are probably looking to deepen your skills as a coach. I hope this podcast will be a helpful resource for you and contributes to your journey. Hi, coaches! In this episode, I want to talk about a topic that's top of mind for many of us. How do we measure results of coaching? How do we know our coaching has been effective? Especially newer coaches who do not yet have many people that they have accompanied towards positive change might be wondering what they can tell people about the results of coaching. How can we measure it? If you do not have clarity about that can make it challenging for you to attract new clients and explain clearly what the outcomes of your work will be to potential clients. When coaches don't know how to measure results of their work, they might lose confidence in their own ability to deliver impactful coaching. So first thing off, let me come up with a summary sentence, and then I'll unpack some of my own experience and I'll share some research with you so that you know what to pay attention to when we talk about measuring results, creating results, or measuring effectiveness of coaching. So here's my summary sentence. Coaching tends to work best when a client who's genuinely ready is supported by a skilled, flexible coach and engages in a safe, structured, and reflective partnership that translates into real-world action or strengthens their psychological capacity. Every word in that sentence is intentional, so let me break it down for you. What's behind it? Meta-analysis and process research in coaching psychology point to several key groups of predictors that influence coaching success. The first group relates to the client. In many ways, the effectiveness of coaching depends on whether you're working with a client who's actually able and willing to create results. So that's why I said that it needs to be a ready client. The client-related predictors would be readiness for change, obviously, and then if you coach a person who's open-minded, motivated, who's willing to reflect, and who's ready to take action, they will make greater progress in coaching. It doesn't mean that they won't experience hesitation or resistance. They do not have to be robots, of course. It means that your client's readiness for action, their motivation, and their dissatisfaction with the current state of things is greater than their resistance. They may not know how to overcome resistance yet, but they want to do it, and they are ready to take action. Another client-related predictor is goal clarity. The clearer your client's goals are, the more likely they are to achieve them. Those goals also need to be internally meaningful. That's why we often ask questions like, why is this important to you? And it's not because it's something coaches are supposed to ask. We ask it because research consistently shows that self-concordant goals that genuinely matter to the client, are far more likely to be achieved. Then your client needs to have some self-regulation capacity, some ability to regulate their emotional impulses, and ability to take action. And of course, a suitable client would be willing to reflect, or at least be ready to reflect on thoughts, emotions, and patterns, because you are not going to be telling them anything. You are inviting them to a dialogue. Actually, you can notice some of this information or client qualities even when you do discovery calls with your prospective clients. For example, a person shares some of their thoughts and they say something like, "Oh, actually, I thought about why I can do this, and then I had this idea." See, they may not have been able to resolve the issue on their own, but they have at least engaged in some level of self-reflection, which signals the potential to deepen that capacity and translate it into action for a better outcome. Last but not least, your client needs to have some agency or ownership. They need to take responsibility for action. If in a discovery call your potential client says, "It's someone else's fault, someone else is responsible, my boss is like this, and my partner is like that, and the economy is like that, and there's nothing I can do," they may keep looking at things that are outside of their control or influence. If people don't even attempt to explore what they can influence or leverage, they are unlikely at this stage to be ready for coaching, because meaningful change ultimately depends on their sense of agency. Then, of course, there are coach-related predictors. Coach-related predictors are all actually part of the ICF core coaching competencies. I refer to the ICF competencies because that's the model that I follow, but they are relevant even if you belong to other professional associations, because those are key coaching skills and qualities. For example, emotional intelligence, your ability to get attuned with your clients, flexibility of approach, because we need to be able to adjust our way of coaching to match our clients' learning style and communication style. Of course, as a coach, you need to be culturally sensitive, to be skilled in goal setting and goal tracking, and you need to be able to facilitate reflection, not give advice. Non-directive, inquiry-based approaches are consistently linked to better outcomes. So our commitment to a non-directive process isn't just a philosophy, it's grounded in research. The next group of predictors relates to the process itself, with the most significant factor being the working alliance, or simply the coaching relationship. The concept of the working alliance originates from psychotherapy, but it is widely applied in coaching as well. Research shows that a strong working alliance between coach and client can account for up to 40% of coaching effectiveness, whereas specific interventions, methods, or coaching models tend to play a much smaller role. A widely cited model, often attributed to Michael Lambert, looks like this. Working alliance or relationship accounts for 30 to 40%, and that includes trust, rapport, emotional bond, agreement on goals, agreement on tasks, psychological safety. Then client-related factors account for 40 to 50%, and that's motivation and readiness for change, personal resources, such as resilience, cognitive capacity, emotional regulation. Then there's life context and timing, whether it's actually a good moment for change. Then 10 to 50% would be techniques, models, or interventions. See, they're significantly less impactful than many people might assume. And last but not least is the hope factor, 10 to 15%. It's the client's belief that coaching or therapy will help. It's perceived credibility of their practitioner and a sense of progress and momentum. So the working alliance for the relationship is not a nice to have. It's structurally central to outcome. Techniques matter, but only after alliance and readiness are in place. The next important thing is psychological safety. If your clients feel safe, they feel more relaxed, their inner sensor steps back, and they are able to be more creative in the process, share ideas more freely. I love using approaches like outrageous brainstorming, where clients can share whatever ridiculous ideas come to their mind just to release their uncensored creative potential. A good coaching process is usually both structured and flexible. The structure serves as a container for a conversation so that a client does not lose focus on the goal or desired conversation deliverables. But at the same time, there needs to be enough flexibility to follow the client. Another thing about the process is that regular reflection and action cycles are effective. That is why coaching works best when it's a long-term engagement, or at least there are a few sessions, not a one-off conversation. The cycle of reflection, action, and reflection again usually leads to much better outcomes. Last but not least, there are also context-related predictors. Our environment matters a lot. If our client's environment is not supportive, then the change might be suppressed. There are so many examples that I have personally seen when a person came up with some ideas, and when they try to execute, they face lack of support or unresponsiveness or even resistance or hostility, and then they had to rethink their steps. In organizational setting, manager support matters very, very much. And in life coaching, alignment with the life context matters. For example, if your client attempts a change and at the same time there are some life events happening that require a lot of efforts from the client, then they may not be able to engage in the change because they simply do not have the resources to do anything on top of that. It's important to assess the client's life context when they come to their first discovery call or chemistry session. You might ask, is this a good time for you to focus on this? Do you have the capacity and resources right now? Is there anything urgent that might get in the way? Are there any major changes coming up, like moving to a new country or having a baby soon? These are all life-changing events. When you know about all these factors, you can ask your clients or prospective clients very specific questions, very intentional questions, and you can pay attention to very specific things during the interview or during the discovery call based on what your potential clients tell you, just to gauge how ready the person is. The next big question would be how you're going to measure success of coaching or effectiveness of your work. In organizational coaching, assessments are often used before and after. All in all, I am very supportive of assessments, and I'm a co-author of a psychometric diagnostic assessment for teams and team leaders. I think assessments provide a shortcut to awareness and make it easier to measure results and see outcomes, but they need to be administered carefully and ethically. You do not want an assessment to impact your client's career or performance evaluation, because then the whole process will be evaluation focused. All assessments are good as long as they are used in a very client-minded way. There aren't really any universally accepted frameworks to assess coaching effectiveness. So usually I think it's fair to use a multi-dimensional structure of outcomes. I personally like to measure results with a client across 4 different areas. There are cognitive results, what new insights they've got. Then the behavioral results, what new actions they've taken, new decisions they made, or new habits that they developed. Number 3 would be emotional results. Are there any changes in their emotional responses or reactions? And the 4th level is around their overall psychological well-being. We often say that we can't guarantee the results, but there should be some progress at least at one of those levels. For example, if your client is reflective, if there's psychological safety and trust in the space, if there's enough process flexibility created by you, if you are being non-directive in your approach and you invite reflection, then it's very likely that your client will have some cognitive shifts or insights, as we often call them. If your client is ready to take action and the environmental conditions are favorable, if goal setting is clear, then your client is very likely to take some action steps, so you'll see results at the behavioral level. You can't do anything in coaching single-handedly, of course, because it's a partnership. But as long as you know what you need to facilitate to provide better conditions for your clients to achieve their goals, then you will be able to facilitate that. There's often a form of pre-post comparison. Without it, you can't reliably detect change. Make sure the baseline is not imposed or overly formalized, because it can shift the dynamics into evaluation, as I said earlier, which will affect the coaching relationship, coaching results, and maybe even your client's psychological well-being. In both research and practice, it is resolved through collaborative baselining, or we usually refer to it as coaching agreements. If you co-create a starting point with a client using self-rating, reflective questions, sometimes external input, like stakeholder input, you capture the initial state in a way that reflects your client's perspective and context. And then later, either when you do a midpoint review or when you do your final evaluation, you revisit the same reference point. And that's usually enough to create a valid comparison without compromising the coaching stance. So it's consistency of reference that's going to help you and your client evaluate the effectiveness of your coaching work. You can also share with your clients the changes that you are observing. For example, when your client just started working with you, they kept asking for or hoping for advice, even though you told them that coaches do not tell people what to do. If you were consistent with your approach, you could have noticed a shift. I always do. Clients tend to become more resourceful over time. The more consistently you show trust in their ability to find their own answers, invite them into deeper reflection, and support them in ways that match how they learn best, the more you'll start to see a shift. They'll begin generating more of their own ideas, rely less on you for advice, and spend longer engaging in meaningful reflection. So this is one of the changes that you can highlight for them and say, hey, I've noticed something as we progress in our coaching. I noticed you stopped asking me to give you advice. What do you think happened? What's the change in you that resulted in this behavior? There could be other signs. For example, here's another thing I often notice. My typical engagement is 3 months at least. And then I say, okay, now I'm observing how you can notice your own thoughts or biases or inner conflicts and name them. Before, when we started, I used to share a lot more observations with you about what inner conflicts show up in what you're saying. And now I'm noticing that as you talk, you can spot the inner conflicts yourself. What's happened? What does this say about the change in your self-awareness? What kind of skill have you acquired through our coaching work? There can be a narrative change, and you can share observations about that as well. It's about how the client talks about themselves, what shifts in identity and perspectives have happened, how their confidence has increased, how their emotional regulation has increased. Maybe in the beginning, your client refers to themselves as someone who always second guesses their decisions. And then later you hear them say, well, I trust my judgment now. I can make decisions and stand by them. Or at first your client says, I just don't have a choice. This is how things are. And then over time it shifts to, I can see where I do have influence and I can choose how I respond. Maybe in the beginning they describe themselves as someone who gets overwhelmed all the time. And then later they say, I still feel the pressure, but I know how to manage it and stay grounded. Do not only stay at the behavior level. This is an important level, but it's not the only one. Of course, there are always external factors, and this is one of the most difficult issues. Even in research, it's difficult to isolate coaching effects because, real-life contexts are complex. Again, with that in mind, what we can do is to compare before and after states. Pay attention to different levels of results. Collect perspective from your client and other stakeholders if applicable. For example, you can hear your client say, oh, my manager told me that my confidence level during meetings increased. Or my manager made an observation that I started to show more initiative and he was quite happy about that. Well, that was all for today. Based on everything that you heard today, you can create your way, your methodology to onboard clients, do chemistry calls with them to evaluate where your prospective clients are in the change process and how to support them best, what to ask in order to co-create the most productive process for them, how to do pre and post measurements, how to take external factors into account and which ones. This work has to be done by each of us in our own practices. No one can do this work for us because we all work in different ways. But once you do this work and once your approach is solid, I'm sure that will result in a greater satisfaction both for you and your clients. In the next episode, I want to talk about energy shifts. What do we mean in coaching when we refer to energy shifts and how you can use them as a tool to deepen awareness for your clients as well as the relational aspect of your work. New episodes are released every 2 weeks, alternating with our YouTube series, Conversations with Coaches, where we explore the real, behind-the-scenes work of practitioners who coach people across different niches. If you're looking to move beyond tools and techniques and develop a more reflective, psychologically grounded, relational coaching practice, our ICF accredited programs have reopened for 2026. You can find all the details at our website. It's www.upthinkcoaching.com. We are also keeping a waiting list for our Leader as Coach program this year. It's delivered as 2 online half-day workshops dedicated to hands-on experiential practice. Please contact me to save your spot. I'm always open to meaningful conversations on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out. I also offer one-on-one mentor coaching and supervision if you're looking for a space to think more deeply about your work. All right, see you next time.